The Galactic Council had gathered in their shining hall among the stars. Delegates from many different worlds sat in silence as they waited for the arrival of Earth's representatives. For years, the Trelvian Empire had been growing stronger, spreading fear across nearby systems. Many believed Earth would soon bend under the pressure, just like so many other worlds before it. The Council hoped Earth would send diplomats, soft voices who could be silenced or bullied into compliance. But when the doors opened, the hall was struck with surprise. It was not diplomats who entered. It was a soldier. Captain Daniel Cross walked with calm steps, his posture straight, his face showing no fear. He was not dressed in rich robes like the alien ambassadors. His uniform was simple, worn from years of service. A scar along his jaw carried the memory of battles fought long before this day. The Council had heard his name whispered before. He was the man who had turned the Orion skirmishes into a victory for Earth when all seemed lost. He was not a man who surrendered. He was a man who fought. At his side walked Lieutenant Megan Holt. She was not there for decoration. She was sharp, alert, her eyes scanning every corner of the hall. Where Daniel was a warrior, she was a thinker. She had uncovered secret plots in the past, and her quick mind had saved lives more than once. Together, they were not a team of diplomats. They were a team of survivors, fighters, and defenders. The alien delegates stared in disbelief. The Trelvians, tall and broad with armor-like skin, bared their sharp teeth in amusement. High Warlord Krath, leader of the Trelvian delegation, leaned back in his seat, his claws tapping on the table. He had expected an easy day. He would threaten, he would demand, and Earth would fold. But the sight of Daniel unsettled him. He did not look like a man ready to beg for mercy. Daniel's boots echoed against the floor as he walked to his seat.
He did not bow.
He did not lower his head. Instead, he met the eyes of each alien delegate one by one. Some shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, others sneered. But none could ignore the silent message his presence carried. Earth had not come to bow. Earth had come to stand. When he sat down, Megan quietly placed a small device on the table. It looked like nothing more than a recorder, but it was more than that. It was linked to her systems, ready to gather every piece of information it could. She listened to the soft hum of the warship outside. The Trelvian vessel, Kalor's Fang, loomed over them like a predator circling its prey. She wondered if the Council had realized that the ship's weapons were already pointed at them. She doubted it. But she and Daniel had not come unprepared. The Council chamber filled with noise as discussions began. Aliens spoke in many voices, some deep and rumbling, others sharp and hissing. Proposals were made, threats hidden behind polite words. Through it all, Daniel sat still, listening, waiting. Megan watched too, noticing details others missed. The way Krath's soldiers positioned themselves near the exits. The way certain systems on the warship powered up when certain topics were raised. Something was wrong. This was not a meeting of peace. This was a trap. Daniel leaned toward her slightly, his voice low, meant for her ears alone. "Do you see it too?" She nodded. "They are not here to talk. They are here to test us, maybe even to break us." Daniel's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then let them try." As the hours passed, the Council grew restless. Some delegates wanted to accept Krath's terms, to bow and survive. Others wanted to resist but lacked the courage to say it out loud. Only Daniel spoke with strength. When Krath declared that Earth must disarm its fleets and pay tribute, Daniel's reply was firm. "Earth will not kneel," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We will not give up our defenses. We will not surrender our people. We have faced worse than threats, and we are still here. If you believe Earth will break, then you do not know us at all." A silence followed. The Trelvians laughed, their voices like growls echoing through the hall. But beneath the laughter was unease. Krath studied Daniel closely. He had seen many species. He had broken many worlds. But there was something in the human's eyes that gave him pause. It was not pride. It was not arrogance. It was something deeper. A refusal to ever yield. Megan kept her calm, though her mind raced. Her device picked up strange patterns in the ship's systems. Power surges, hidden commands. She was sure now. The Trelvians had planned to attack. They wanted to make an example of Earth, to show the galaxy that even humans could be crushed. She leaned closer to Daniel and whispered her findings. He nodded, his eyes never leaving Krath's. The Trelvian warlord smirked. "You speak boldly, human, But words mean little without strength. Do you think your world is ready to face the fire? Daniel did not flinch. We don't think, we know. Humans do not surrender. Not to fear. Not to force. Not to you. Krath's smirk faded just for a moment. The council chamber felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened. Other delegates whispered among themselves, some shocked, some inspired. Earth had not sent soft voices. Earth had sent steel. That night aboard the warship, Daniel and Megan were given quarters. Megan immediately began working on her data. She pieced together fragments of code, messages hidden within the ship's systems. The Trelvians had prepared to lock the council chamber and fire on the ships outside if Earth showed weakness. But Daniel had not shown weakness. He had shown defiance. Now the Trelvians would be forced to shift their plan. Daniel stood by the window looking out at the stars. His reflection stared back at him, scarred and weathered, but still strong. He thought of Earth, of the billions of people who had no idea what decisions were being made here tonight. They trusted him even if they did not know his name. He had carried that trust before in the Orion battles. He would carry it again. Megan finally looked up from her work. They will make their move soon. Daniel turned from the window. Then we will be ready. There was no fear in his voice. No hesitation. Only resolve. It was the same resolve that had carried him through every fight before. The same resolve that would carry him through this one. The council had expected diplomats. The Trelvians had expected victims. But Earth had sent something else. They had sent a dangerous man, a soldier who would not surrender, and beside him a mind sharp enough to see through any scheme. Together, they would not let Earth fall. In the dark of the warship, as alien soldiers prepared their traps and commanders whispered their plans, Daniel Cross closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of home, of the people he fought for, of the reason he stood here now. Then he opened them again, his gaze steady, his will unshaken. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant when humans refused to bow. The warship Kalor's Fang floated in space like a predator waiting for its moment to strike. It was massive, far larger than anything Earth had built, its surface covered in weapons that could tear apart entire fleets. The council delegates had been brought aboard under the promise of peace, but Daniel Cross and Megan Holt knew better. Every detail of the ship screamed of danger. The way the guards stood too close, the way the doors sealed with heavy locks, the way every corridor seemed to funnel toward choke points. It was all designed for control. It was a trap, dressed as diplomacy. Daniel walked with steady steps through the halls of the warship, his boots echoing against the metal floor. He kept his eyes forward, but he noticed everything. The shape of the corridors, the distance between weapon placements, the speed at which soldiers responded when summoned. He did not look like a diplomat, and he was not trying to. He looked like what he was, a soldier studying a battlefield. The Trelvian officers tried to intimidate him with their size and their growls, but he simply nodded as if acknowledging them, his calm demeanor only adding to their unease. Megan walked a step behind him, her gaze moving constantly, watching the guards, the cameras, the panels on the walls. She carried a small device in her hand, appearing to take notes but actually mapping out the ship's systems. Each time a door opened, her device recorded the signal. Each time a control panel beeped, she stored the code. She was building a picture piece by piece, and the more she gathered, the clearer it became that this ship was not a vessel of diplomacy. It was a fortress. High Warlord Krath had planned this carefully. He wanted to show the Council that Earth was weak. He wanted to break humanity in front of every watching race. To him, humans were nothing but another species to conquer. But what unsettled him was how Daniel carried himself. This was not a man who looked afraid. This was a man who looked ready. The council chamber aboard the warship was vast, lined with banners of the Trelvian Empire. Statues of warriors stood along the walls, their sharp weapons pointing downward as if warning those who entered. The long table in the center gleamed under the artificial lights, its surface polished like a mirror. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the seats, their voices hushed as Daniel and Megan entered. They had all expected Earth to send soft voices, people who would speak carefully and beg for mercy. Instead, they saw a scarred soldier and a sharp-eyed lieutenant. Krath rose from his seat, his massive form towering over the others. His voice rumbled through the chamber. "Welcome, humans. You sit in the heart of strength. The Kalor's Fang is the pride of the Trelvian fleet. Remember where you are. Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "I never forget where I am," he said calmly. "And I never forget who I'm speaking to." Krath narrowed his eyes. He was not used to defiance. Most beings trembled in his presence. Yet Daniel's tone was steady, almost casual. It was the tone of someone who had faced death before and did not fear it now. The meeting began. Proposals were made, though they were more like demands. Krath insisted that Earth must give up its weapons and pay tribute. He said the Trelvian Empire would protect humanity in return. Other delegates urged acceptance. Some whispered of survival, of the cost of resistance. But Daniel's expression never changed. He sat silently, his hands folded, waiting for the right moment. Megan, meanwhile, used her device under the table. She accessed minor systems, careful not to alert the Trelvians. Her eyes flicked across the data. She saw power fluctuations in the weapon systems, commands hidden within the ship's network. The warship's cannons were already aimed at Council ships outside. The Trelvians were not planning peace. They were preparing for slaughter. She leaned slightly toward Daniel and whispered, "They are ready to fire." He gave the smallest nod. He had already guessed. Krath leaned forward, his claws tapping against the table. "What do you say, human? Will your people kneel or will they burn?" Daniel's voice was steady, strong. "Earth does not kneel. Not to you. Not to anyone." The chamber fell silent. Some delegates gasped, others murmured in shock. The Trelvians growled, their anger rising, but Daniel's words carried weight. They were not just words of pride. They were words of defiance, backed by the steady confidence of a man who had survived the impossible before. Krath's lip curled. "Then you choose fire." Daniel's eyes locked with his. "We choose freedom. And if you want to test us, you will learn what humans are made of." Megan felt the tension tighten around them like a noose. She glanced at her device again and saw the signals change. The warship's systems were moving into battle mode. The trap was nearly sprung. She leaned closer to Daniel. "It's coming," she whispered. He looked at her for a brief moment, then gave the faintest smile. "Good." The rest of the council delegates shifted uneasily in their seats. Some were afraid, others were curious. They had heard of human stubbornness, but they had never seen it so clearly. Daniel's refusal to bend was not arrogance. It was survival. And for the first time, some of them wondered if Earth might be stronger than they had believed. After the session, Daniel and Megan were escorted back to their quarters. The corridors felt tighter now, the guards more alert, the shadows deeper. Megan immediately began working with the data she had stolen. She pieced together fragments of code and saw that the Trelvians had a plan to isolate the council, seal the chambers, and destroy their ships outside. It was not a negotiation. It was a staged execution. Daniel stood by the door, arms crossed, watching the guards outside through the narrow window. He could feel the tension rising in the air. He had been on battlefields before. He knew the feeling before violence, the quiet before the storm. He thought of Earth, of the people who lived their lives unaware of what was happening here. They were his reason. They were why he stood on this warship instead of someone else. Megan finally looked up from her device. "They are waiting for tomorrow. That's when they will spring the trap." Daniel nodded. "Then tomorrow we show them who we are." There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt, just calm certainty. He did not know exactly how they would fight yet, but he knew they would. Humans had always been underestimated. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced, but they were the most relentless. They did not stop when others would. They did not break when others did. And tomorrow the Trelvians would learn that truth. The night passed slowly aboard the warship. The hum of its engines filled the silence, a constant reminder of the power that surrounded them. Megan slept only for a short while, her mind too busy. Daniel rested with his eyes closed, though his senses stayed sharp. Both knew that the coming day would decide not just their fate, but Earth's place in the galaxy. When the artificial lights of morning filled their quarters, Daniel rose and adjusted his uniform. Megan gathered her devices and checked her files one last time. They were ready. As the guards came to escort them back to the chamber, Daniel gave Megan a steady look. "No matter what happens, we don't bend," he said. She nodded. "We don't bend." And with that they stepped into the corridor, walking toward the storm that awaited them, their resolve unbroken, their will unshaken. The Trelvian warship was a fortress, but they were humans, and humans had never been easy prey. The council chamber aboard the warship filled again with voices the next day. The banners of the Trelvian Empire hung high, casting long shadows across the delegates' faces. Every alien in the room seemed tense, as though they sensed the storm that was about to break. The council had gathered for what was supposed to be another round of negotiations, but Daniel Cross and Megan Holt already knew this was no negotiation. It was a test, and the Trelvians had planned every detail of it. Daniel walked into the chamber with the same calm he always carried. His expression was steady, his steps firm. He took in the details once more. The guards standing near the exits, the hidden weapons on the walls, the faint hum of energy flowing through the ship's systems. Megan followed close behind, her device hidden in her hand, collecting every signal, every transmission. Her sharp eyes scanned the chamber, catching small details that others missed. She noticed the way certain Trelvian officers tapped their claws against their arms, sending signals. She saw how the lights flickered in rhythm with the ship's weapon systems. Every sign pointed to the same truth. The trap was ready. High Warlord Krath stood at the head of the table, towering over everyone. His deep voice rumbled across the hall. Today, the Trelvian Empire offers one last chance. Earth must submit. Disarm your fleets, pay tribute, and live under our protection. Refuse, and you will be crushed before the galaxy. The other delegates looked toward Daniel, waiting for his response. Some hoped he would surrender, believing it was the only way to survive. Others wanted to see if the rumors about human defiance were true. Daniel looked at Krath without fear. His voice was calm but strong when he answered, Earth will not submit. We will not give up our freedom. We will not give up our people. You think you can scare us, but we are not afraid. Gasps filled the chamber. Some delegates whispered in disbelief. The Trelvian guards growled, ready to act, but Daniel's steady tone carried through the room like a blade cutting through silence. Megan watched the data on her device as systems shifted around them. The warship's cannons locked onto the council ships outside. Seals tightened around the chamber doors. Krath's smirk widened. So be it, the warlord said. Then you will witness the power of the Trelvian Empire, and your people will be nothing but dust. The lights dimmed for a moment, and then alarms echoed faintly through the corridors. The Trelvian soldiers moved to lock the exits. Megan's device lit up with warnings as systems across the ship activated. It had begun. The trap was springing shut. Daniel rose from his seat slowly, his calm never faltering. His eyes locked on Krath. You think we are trapped, but you don't understand humans. We don't break. We don't surrender. Not today. Not ever. Krath's growl filled the chamber as he raised his clawed hand, signaling his soldiers. The guards stepped forward, weapons ready. But before they could act, Megan pressed her device. A hidden program she had prepared spread like fire through the ship's minor systems. Lights flickered, doors jammed, and communication lines scrambled. The soldiers hesitated, confused as their commands failed. Daniel acted in that moment. He pulled a small sidearm from his uniform. An old human weapon by alien standards, but in his hands it became precise and deadly. He fired at the nearest guard, dropping him instantly. Chaos erupted. The chamber filled with shouts and blaster fire. Delegates dove for cover as Daniel moved with sharp, practiced steps, guiding Megan behind the table for protection. The Trelvian soldiers tried to push forward, but Megan's program spread deeper, locking some of the doors and turning off certain defenses. Daniel fired again and again, every shot forcing the enemy back. He was outnumbered, but his will was stronger than their fear. He moved with the steady rhythm of a man who had fought too many battles to be shaken now. Krath roared with fury. You dare fight here, human? You think you can stand against the Empire? Daniel didn't waste words. His eyes were cold, his focus sharp. Each move he made was for survival. Each shot meant to protect Megan and the delegates who now looked at him with wide eyes. They had expected weakness. Instead, they saw a human who fought as if the entire galaxy rested on his shoulders. Megan kept working, her fingers flying across her device. She tapped into the ship's internal systems, unlocking cameras, shutting down turrets, and sending false commands. The Trelvian soldiers grew more confused with each moment, unsure which orders to follow. The warship systems flickered and shifted under her control. Daniel shouted over the chaos, his voice strong and clear. To the delegates, choose now. Stand with Earth or watch as the Trelvians destroy you next. Some delegates hesitated, but others saw the truth. They saw the cannons outside, aimed not just at Earth ships but at their own. They realized this was never about peace. This was about power. One by one, council guards and even some delegates joined the fight, turning against the Trelvians. What began as a trap started to crumble under the weight of defiance. Blaster fire filled the chamber. The air smelled of smoke and burning metal. Daniel pressed forward, rallying those who fought beside him. His voice cut through fear, giving courage to those who had none. Megan's device kept spreading chaos through the warship, shutting down more systems, buying them precious time. The tide was shifting. Krath's rage burned as he fought to regain control. He slammed his clawed hand against the table, splintering the metal. "Enough, crush them!" he roared. More soldiers poured into the chamber, their heavy steps shaking the floor. But Daniel did not falter. He raised his weapon and stood tall. "Come then," he said, his voice steady. "But remember this, you will never break humanity." The fight grew fiercer. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Smoke filled the air, and the chamber shook with the force of the battle. Megan sent one final command, and the ship's lights flickered out for a brief moment, plunging the chamber into darkness. In that instant, Daniel moved like a shadow, striking before the soldiers could even see him. By the time the lights returned, several enemies lay on the ground. Delegates who had once doubted Earth now fought at his side, inspired by his refusal to yield. Together they pushed back against the Trelvian soldiers. Megan's sharp mind guided them through the chaos, calling out warnings, shutting down systems, and keeping Daniel informed. Every moment was survival. Every move was a statement. Finally, as the battle raged, Daniel forced his way toward the command platform where Krath stood. The warlord bared his teeth, towering over him, his claws ready to strike, but Daniel stood firm, his weapon steady, his eyes locked on Krath's. "You wanted to show the galaxy that humans were weak," Daniel said. "Now they see the truth. We are not weak. We are not afraid. And we will never surrender." The chamber fell silent for a moment as the words carried through the smoke. Delegates who had doubted Earth now looked at Daniel with awe. Soldiers who had followed orders blindly now hesitated, their confidence shaken. The trap had been turned upside down. Megan stood beside him, her device still glowing in her hand, her eyes sharp with determination. She looked at Krath and spoke firmly. "Your empire has underestimated us, and now it pays the price." The warlord's growl echoed, but even he could see the truth. His plan was failing. His ship was faltering. The humans had turned defiance into strength, and that strength was spreading across the chamber like fire. The battle was not yet finished, but something greater had already been decided. Humanity had made its stand, and the galaxy had witnessed it. The Trelvians could roar, they could threaten, but they could not erase what had just happened. Earth had not sent diplomats. It had sent warriors. And in the heart of the enemy's warship, those warriors had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human. The warship shook with fire and chaos as the battle spread beyond the council chamber. Smoke drifted through the corridors. Alarms blared in every section, and the steady hum of the ship's engines now carried the sound of strain. The Trelvians had expected an easy show of dominance, but instead they were facing something they had not planned for. Humans who would not yield. Daniel Cross pushed forward through the storm, his weapon steady, his resolve unbroken. At his side, Megan Holt guided him with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. The council delegates who had chosen to fight moved with them. Many were frightened, unused to combat, but Daniel's calm leadership gave them strength. He called out orders in a firm voice, simple and direct, the kind of words that cut through panic. "Cover the flank. Watch the doors. Keep moving." His words carried weight, and those who heard them obeyed, finding courage they did not know they had. Megan tapped furiously on her device as they moved. Her virus had already disrupted several systems, but the Trelvian technicians were working hard to regain control. She sent new commands, locking certain blast doors while opening others to guide their path. She cut power to sections of the ship to slow their enemies. Every second she bought mattered. She knew they could not win by strength alone. They had to use the ship itself against the Trelvians. The corridors were narrow and filled with danger. Trelvian soldiers charged from both sides, their weapons blazing, their roars shaking the air. Daniel led the defense, firing with precise aim, every shot forcing the enemy back. His movements were steady, efficient, born from years of experience. He did not waste energy. He did not panic. He fought like a man who understood that survival depended not on fear, but on focus. The delegates saw him stand his ground against enemies twice his size, and they followed. Even those who had doubted Earth now understood. This was not just about one man or one mission. This was about showing the galaxy what humanity truly was. Krath, the High Warlord, watched the chaos unfold from the command deck. His claws dug into the railing as he roared at his officers. Crush them. Seal the decks! Do not let them reach the control center. His fury was clear, but so was his fear. He had underestimated the humans. He had thought them weak, yet they fought with a fire he had not seen before. Their defiance spread like a disease, infecting even the council delegates who should have been easy to intimidate. Daniel pressed forward with his group, his mind working through the layout of the ship. He had studied it as he walked earlier, noting choke points and possible weaknesses. Now that knowledge guided him. When they reached a junction, he pointed to the left. This way, he said firmly. Megan checked her device and confirmed. The path he chose led toward the control center, where they might be able to turn the ship's systems fully against their enemies. But the Trelvians did not make it easy. At every turn, more soldiers waited, the air filled with smoke and sparks as blasters struck walls and ceilings. Daniel's sidearm grew hot in his hand, but he never hesitated. He ducked, rolled, fired again, his every move honed by countless battles. Megan stayed close, shielding her device while still giving him quick updates. More coming from the right. 2 squads ahead. Doors sealed behind us, they fought through step by step. The council guards who had chosen to fight took courage from Daniel's example. They covered him, supported Megan, and held the line when enemies tried to overwhelm them. Each small victory built momentum. Each step forward carried them closer to their goal. The Trelvian soldiers grew frustrated. They were larger, stronger, and better armed, yet they could not break the humans. Their growls filled the corridors as they clashed again and again, but Daniel's calm defiance never wavered. He fought as if he carried the weight of Earth itself, and in many ways he did. When they finally reached a heavy blast door leading to the control center, Megan rushed to the panel. Her fingers flew across the device, hacking into the systems. Sparks shot from the controls as she forced them open. The door slowly slid aside, revealing the heart of the warship's operations. Inside, officers shouted commands, their voices sharp with panic. Screens displayed every part of the ship, showing the spread of the chaos. The cannons were still locked onto the council ships outside, ready to fire. Krath's trap was still moments away from completion, unless Daniel and Megan stopped it. Daniel stormed into the room, his weapon raised. "This ends now," he shouted. The officers froze, some reaching for weapons, others backing away. Megan rushed to the central console, plugging in her device. The screens flickered as her virus spread faster, taking control of more systems. Krath's voice thundered over the speakers. "You cannot stop us, human. The galaxy will bow to the Empire." Daniel fired a shot into the ceiling, silencing the officers. His voice was steady as he answered. "No, Krath, the galaxy will see that humans don't bow." The battle raged in the control center. Trelvian soldiers stormed in, weapons blazing. Daniel fought fiercely, holding them back while Megan worked. The council guards defended the consoles, shouting and firing with a courage they had not known before. The room shook with explosions as systems overloaded. Sparks rained from the ceiling, smoke filled the air, and alarms blared louder. Megan's voice cut through the chaos. "I've got control of the secondary weapons," she shouted. Daniel covered her as she sent new commands. Cannons that had once aimed at council ships now turned against Trelvian escorts. Explosions lit the view outside the window as the warship's allies were struck by their own weapons. The tide was shifting. What had begun as a trap for Earth was becoming a disaster for the Trelvians. Krath roared over the speakers, his fury echoing. "Kill them! Kill them all!" But Daniel pressed forward, fighting with relentless will. He knew they could not hold forever, but they did not need to. They only needed to show the galaxy the truth. Humanity did not surrender. Humanity fought. The control center became a battlefield of fire and smoke. Megan's hands never stopped moving, sending new commands, locking out the Trelvian officers and turning more of the ship's systems against itself. Daniel's weapon blazed until it was nearly empty, but he used every shot with purpose. The council guards fought beside him, no longer fearful but proud. At last, Megan's voice rang out. "The cannons are offline. The council ships are safe." Daniel stood in the smoke-filled room, his chest heaving, his weapon still raised. Around him lay the fallen bodies of enemies who had thought humans would break. But they had not broken. They had endured. They had fought. And they had turned the Trelvian trap into a symbol of defiance. The war was not over. Krath still commanded the warship. Soldiers still filled the corridors. But for the first time, the Council saw that the Trelvians could bleed. For the first time, they saw that Earth's defiance could turn fear into strength. And for Daniel Cross and Megan Holt, the mission was not finished. They had won a battle, but the warship was still theirs to face. Daniel looked at Megan, his voice calm even through the chaos. "We hold until the end. We don't bend." She nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "We don't bend." And as the smoke cleared for a moment, Daniel stood tall in the control center of the enemy's greatest warship, a scarred soldier who carried the unbroken will of his people. The Trelvians had thought they were facing diplomats. Instead, they had met something far more dangerous. They had met humanity's refusal to surrender. The control center of the warship burned with sparks and smoke. The walls shook as systems failed, lights flickered, and alarms screamed across every deck. Daniel Cross stood in the middle of the chaos, his weapon raised, his body bruised but still unyielding. Around him, council guards fought with renewed strength, their voices carrying courage instead of fear. At his side, Megan Holt worked furiously on her device, her sharp eyes scanning the screens as she tried to hold control of the ship's systems. The Trelvian Empire had planned to humiliate humanity, but now the trap was falling apart. The heavy doors of the control center burst open, and more Trelvian soldiers charged inside. Their roars filled the room, their weapons blazing. Daniel moved instantly, stepping forward to meet them. His sidearm was nearly empty, but his aim was precise. Each shot struck true, slowing the enemy's advance. He ducked behind cover, reloaded, and stood tall once again. The soldiers were larger, stronger, but he refused to back down. Every step he took was for Earth, for the people who trusted him even if they did not know his name. Megan shouted above the noise. "Daniel, they're trying to reset the systems. If they succeed, they'll fire on the Council ships again." He fired another shot, forcing the enemy back for a moment. "Then stop them, Megan. Hold them off. I'll handle this side." She nodded, her hands moving quickly over the console. She sent new commands into the network, fighting the Trelvian technicians who struggled to regain control. Sparks shot from the panels as the two sides clashed in a silent digital war. Sweat ran down her face, but she did not stop. Her mind raced, sharp and focused, every decision made with speed. If she failed, the Council ships outside would be destroyed. If she succeeded, the galaxy would see that Earth could not be silenced. The Council guards rallied around Daniel. They had been afraid hours earlier, but now they followed him without hesitation. His presence gave them strength, his voice cut through the chaos. "Hold the line. Don't let them through," he shouted, and they obeyed. They fired, they fought, they endured. Every moment they held gave Megan more time to finish her work. Krath's furious voice roared over the speakers. "Human, you think you can defy the Empire? You think you can survive in the heart of our strength? You will fall and Earth will burn." Daniel shouted back, his voice steady and clear. "We don't fall. We don't surrender. Not to you. Not to anyone." The words carried across the control center, even above the sound of battle. Some delegates hiding in the corners looked at him with awe. They had expected Earth to beg for mercy, but instead they saw a soldier standing tall in the face of certain death. They saw a human who refused to bend. Megan's voice rang out suddenly, her eyes fixed on her screen. "I've locked out their main weapons. The cannons can't fire anymore." Daniel gave a brief nod, his focus still on the fight. "Good. Now shut down their engines. Trap them here," she typed furiously, sending her virus deeper into the systems. The screens flickered as commands shifted. Across the ship, engines began to fail. Thrusters shut down, and the warship's great body drifted in space like a wounded beast. Outside, the Council ships saw the change and realized the humans were turning the tide. Their fear began to fade, replaced by hope. But Krath was not finished. With a roar, the High Warlord stormed into the control center himself. His massive frame filled the doorway, his armor glinting in the sparks, his claws ready to strike. The Trelvian soldiers fell back slightly, making way for their leader. He looked at Daniel with fury burning in his eyes. "You dare defy me in my own ship?" Krath growled. "You are nothing, human. I will crush you with my own hands." Daniel stepped forward, his weapon raised, his gaze steady. "You can try." The two faced each other in the center of the room. Krath roared and lunged, his claws slashing through the air. Daniel dodged, firing his sidearm into the warlord's shoulder. The shot burned into Krath's armor but did not stop him. He swung again, forcing Daniel back. The fight turned into a deadly dance, strength against resolve, fury against calm. Megan watched while still working, her heart pounding. She wanted to help, but she knew her role was different. She had to keep the systems locked, had to make sure the ship remained crippled. If Daniel could hold Krath, she could finish what they had started. Krath swung with all his strength, but Daniel used speed and precision. He dodged, struck, and moved again. His weapon ran dry and he threw it aside, pulling a combat knife from his belt. The blade was small compared to Krath's size, but in Daniel's hands it became deadly. He slashed across the warlord's arm, forcing a roar of pain. Krath struck back, claws tearing into Daniel's shoulder, but the human did not fall. He gritted his teeth, blood running down his arm, and kept fighting. The council guards shouted encouragement, their courage rising with every strike Daniel made. Megan's device finally beeped with success. She looked up and shouted, "Engines offline! They can't move. The ship is ours." Daniel heard her voice and pressed forward with renewed strength. He drove his knife into Krath's side, forcing the warlord to stumble. The great Trelvian roared in fury, swinging wildly, but Daniel dodged and struck again. Finally, with one last push, he drove the blade deep into Krath's chest. The warlord staggered, his roar fading, his massive form collapsing to the floor. Silence fell over the control center. The Trelvian soldiers froze, their leader defeated. Smoke filled the air. The alarm still screamed, but the battle had shifted. Daniel stood over Krath's fallen body, blood on his uniform, his chest heaving but his eyes steady. He looked at the soldiers, at the delegates, at everyone watching. "Earth does not surrender," he said. His voice was quiet but carried through the room like thunder. Not today. Not ever. The words settled in the hearts of everyone present. The Trelvian soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, uncertain without their leader. The council guards stood taller, pride shining in their eyes. The delegates whispered to each other, their fear replaced with something new: respect. Megan stepped beside Daniel, her device still glowing in her hand. She looked at him, her voice firm. "The ship is crippled. They can't fire. They can't move. The council ships are safe." Daniel nodded, his eyes never leaving the soldiers. "Then it's done. Let them see what happens when they try to break us." Outside, the crippled warship drifted in space, its weapons silent, its engines dead. The council ship surrounded it, no longer in fear but in triumph. Messages spread quickly across the galaxy. The Trelvian Empire had tried to break Earth, and Earth had answered with defiance. Stories of Daniel Cross and Megan Holt traveled from system to system, growing with every telling. Humans were no longer seen as weak newcomers. They were seen as dangerous, unyielding, and impossible to defeat. In the days that followed, the council recorded the events. Delegates spoke of the human captain who had stood against an empire, of the lieutenant who had turned a warship's systems against itself, of the moment when humanity had shown its will. The galaxy listened and the galaxy remembered. Daniel and Megan returned to their quarters briefly, the weight of the battle heavy on their shoulders. Daniel sat by the window looking out at the stars, his thoughts on Earth. Megan sat beside him, her device finally at rest, her sharp mind still replaying every moment. They had survived, but more than that, they had sent a message. Megan spoke softly. "They'll never look at us the same way again." Daniel nodded, his eyes still on the stars. "Good, let them remember. Let them know who we are." The galaxy had expected diplomats. Instead, Earth had sent a soldier and a thinker. Together, they had stood in the heart of an enemy warship and refused to bend. Their story spread far and wide, a symbol of humanity's unbreakable spirit. And as the crippled warship drifted silently among the stars, the galaxy finally understood the truth. Humans were not easy prey. They were dangerous. They were relentless. They were free,